the Alpha King stumbled upon his enemies Luna in the blizzard, protecting the pups with her own body. The wind screamed like a living thing, clawing at the peaks of the Winterfang Mountains. Snow whipped across the frozen plains in furious waves, blinding the eyes and chilling the soul. Few dared to wander into the heart of the storm, for it was said the mountain spirits themselves wept in the blizzard, protecting secrets older than memory. Yet one figure moved steadily through the white chaos, Alpha King Kalen, ruler of the Winterfangs, a man as cold and commanding as the ice around him. Kalen's cloak was thick, fur-lined, but even it could not shield him entirely from the storm's fury. His boots sank deep into the snow with every step, and his sharp eyes, as gray as frozen steel, scanned the white wasteland. Hunting in the blizzard was a test of endurance and will, a challenge Kalen always met alone. But today, something unusual stirred the air. Something soft yet urgent carried on the wind as though the storm itself whispered of life in danger. Kalen slowed, sensing it before he saw it, and then, amid the swirling snow, he saw her. She was alone. A slender figure trudging through the snow, hunched over with exhaustion, her cloak torn and frozen at the edges. She carried something hidden close to her chest, wrapped tightly in blankets that flapped like wings in the wind. At first, Kalen thought she was a spirit of the mountain, a trick of the blizzard. But then he saw the movement, a tiny paw, soft and trembling. His heart tightened, not in affection but in the alert caution of a king. He knew her. The Luna of the Shadow Claws, the sworn enemy of his clan. Kalen's hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his sword, though he had no real intention to strike. This was not a moment for violence, not yet. The woman struggled, one boot slipping on the icy ground, her head bowing under the storm's weight. Kalen hesitated, seeing her face partially hidden by snow, her dark hair plastered across her cheeks. Despite the enmity between their clans, despite the knowledge of the wars and bloodshed, he felt something stir in him, a sharp, dangerous curiosity mixed with an unspoken awe. The Luna, she sensed him too. She froze, one hand gripping the bundle of life against her chest. Her eyes, dark and wary, searched the blizzard and landed on him. Recognition flashed, and she drew a shaky breath, backing away as if ready to flee, yet the snow held her fast. Kalen's voice broke the wind. "Do not move." His words were low, but they cut through the blizzard like steel. She shivered violently, either from cold or fear. It was hard to tell. "Why are you here?" she called, her voice almost lost in the roar of the storm. "I could ask the same," Kalen said, stepping closer, boots crunching over ice. He noted the bundle again, pups, Shadowclaw pups, innocent, fragile, and entirely defenseless, her lips pressed into a thin line. "They need me." She tightened the blankets. "I cannot let them." Kalen's instincts warred with his conscience. He could leave her to the storm. She was his enemy, after all. Let the blizzard decide her fate. Let the spirits of the mountain do their work. But something about the way she shielded the pups, the desperate determination, the selflessness in the freezing wind, stopped him. Without another thought, he closed the distance. With a single, precise motion, he extended a hand. "Give them to me. You cannot survive much longer in this storm." Her gaze snapped to his hand, suspicion etched in every line of her face. "Why would you help me? I am your enemy," she said, her voice shaking, barely audible over the wind. Kalen did not answer immediately. The wind whipped around them, snow stinging their skin, the air thick with the scent of ice and danger. Finally, he said, "Because you carry life, and life is always worth protecting." It was not a gesture of mercy. It was a decision, a choice made by a king who had never bent for anyone, not even for love. Slowly, hesitantly, the Luna extended her arms, passing the tiny bundle into his hands. The pups whimpered softly, nuzzling against the warmth of his fur-lined cloak. Kalen felt a strange weight settle on him, not of the pups but of responsibility. The blizzard was merciless. Snow cut across his face like knives, and the cold gnawed at his fingers. Yet for all its fury, he moved with purpose, taking the Luna under his arm as carefully as he had taken the pups. He could feel her tense body against his own, rigid with fear and defiance, yet clinging to life with the stubborn strength of a survivor. They stumbled through the storm, each step a battle. Kaelin could sense the wild energy in her, the fierce pride of a Luna, but also the exhaustion that threatened to undo her. Every so often her eyes met his, and there was something unspoken there, a challenge, a question, a flicker of trust that had no name. The blizzard seemed alive, swirling around them, shaping the path, hiding dangers, revealing secrets. Wolves howled somewhere in the distance, echoes of the ancient spirits that roamed the mountains. The pups stirred, sensing the energy of the storm and the strange protector who had claimed them. Kaelin tightened his grip around the bundle, feeling an unfamiliar tension in his chest. He had led his clan through countless battles, faced countless enemies, yet this fragile creature, defying the storm for her young, made him pause. Hours, or perhaps minutes, time was lost in the white chaos past. Kaelin found a hollow in the mountains, a natural shelter carved into ice and rock. It was small, barely enough for him to stretch without scraping the walls, but it would hold them against the storm. He set the pups down first, arranging them in a circle of warmth with his cloak wrapped loosely around them. They whimpered, but their tiny bodies pressed against each other, seeking safety. Then he helped the Luna to her knees, letting her lean against the icy wall, her teeth chattering. "You saved them," she whispered, incredulous, and exhaustion made her voice fragile. "Why?" Kaelin knelt beside her, adjusting the blanket around the pups. "Because no war, no feud is worth their lives," he said simply. His voice was steady, though he felt a strange storm inside him, anger at his own hesitation, awe at her courage, and something else, something that caught him off guard and refused to be named. The Luna looked away, her cheeks pink from cold, her dark eyes reflecting the fire of survival. "You do not understand, this is only the beginning. If they find me," she swallowed hard, "if my clan finds me, they will take them, they will curse you, they will destroy everything." Kaelin's gaze hardened. "Then we must make sure that does not happen." His words were iron, yet his hands shook slightly as he checked the pups were safe. "Do you understand? I will not allow them to be harmed while I am here." For a moment silence fell between them, broken only by the wind outside and the soft whimpers of the pups. Then she spoke, voice barely a whisper. "You are not like other alphas." "I am what I am," Kaelin replied, his eyes meeting hers. There was no malice there, only focus. Yet she could see the subtle tension in him, the unspoken battle within, a struggle between duty, instinct, and something more fragile yet persistent. The cave offered little warmth, but it was enough to survive the night. Kaelin lit a small fire, careful not to burn the fragile ice around them. The light flickered across their faces, highlighting the fatigue and determination etched in every line. The Luna watched him silently, a mixture of suspicion and relief in her gaze. Hours passed. Neither spoke much. The storm outside raged, relentless and untamed, yet inside the small hollow, a fragile truce formed. For all their enmity, all their history of bloodshed, Kaelin and the Luna shared a silent understanding. The pups would survive this night. That was enough. For now, but even in that fragile peace, a question hung in the air, unspoken yet undeniable. What would happen when the storm passed? When the mountains thawed and the world outside the blizzard reasserted itself? Could trust survive where hatred had lived for centuries? Kaelin did not answer. He only watched the Luna as she curled beside the pups, wrapping them in the last of her warmth. He could feel the storm not only outside but within himself, a storm of loyalty, duty, and something deeper. He would protect them. He had no choice, not truly. And the blizzard, as if sensing the tension, howled louder, carrying their unspoken truths into the endless night. The cave offered little warmth, yet it was sanctuary against the blizzard outside. Snow whipped and pounded against the frozen entrance, like 1,000 invisible fists demanding entry. The pups huddled together, their tiny bodies shivering beneath the thin cloak Kalen had wrapped around them. The fire crackled weakly, struggling against the bitter cold, its flames casting long shadows across the ice-streaked walls. Kalen sat across from the Luna, his gray eyes sharp and watchful. He could feel her tension in every line of her body, the rigid posture that betrayed her pride, the wariness that kept her eyes from meeting his for long. Despite their clan's centuries of rivalry, he could see the courage in her every movement, the fierce determination to protect life even in the face of death. "You should rest," he said quietly, his voice firm yet calm. "You've been walking through the storm for hours. Your strength is fading." The Luna's gaze flitted to him, defiance sparking despite exhaustion. "Resting is a luxury I cannot afford, not when they could come for the pups." Her fingers clenched the blanket around the tiny bundle. "They will kill them if they find us." Kalen's jaw tightened. He understood too well the cost of blood feuds and unbroken cycles of vengeance. He had spent years forging power, defending his people, commanding loyalty through fear and respect. Yet this, protecting his enemies young, was different. It stirred something unfamiliar, something that went beyond duty. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "Then we make sure they do not find them." His voice was unwavering, though inside, a storm brewed. He had not anticipated the effect the Luna had on him. She was strength wrapped in vulnerability, defiance wrapped in desperation. And yet she needed him in a way no one ever had. The Luna's eyes softened slightly, but only for a moment. "And why would you do that?" she asked, her tone cautious. "You have no reason to care." "They are not yours." Kalen did not answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at the pups, their tiny faces pressed against each other for warmth. "Because life is worth protecting," he said finally, "even if it belongs to an enemy." The words hung in the air, heavier than any weapon. The Luna's lips parted, almost in surprise, then pressed into a thin line again. She looked away, hiding a flicker of gratitude she could not voice. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sounds were the soft crackle of fire and the low whimper of the pups. Outside, the storm raged on, relentless and wild, a reminder that the world beyond the cave had not yet forgiven them. Slowly, the Luna shifted, moving closer to the fire. Her body trembled, not only from cold but from the exhaustion that weighed her down. Kalen watched, noting every movement, the way her hands hovered protectively over the pups, the way her shoulders tensed at every gust of wind. Despite the history of their clans, despite the hatred she was supposed to harbor, he could feel a fragile thread of trust forming between them. "You can stay here," Kalen said, his voice softer now. "I will not force you to move unless it becomes necessary." The Luna's eyes flicked to his, searching, measuring. She wanted to reject his offer to assert her independence, yet the pup's quiet whimpers reminded her that survival sometimes demanded compromise. "I will not forget this," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Do not mistake it for weakness." Kalen nodded once, accepting her words without argument. He had learned long ago that trust was earned, not demanded, and this Luna, proud, fierce, unyielding, was not someone who could be commanded. She had to choose to trust him, and that choice mattered more than anything else. Night fell slowly, a pale gray darkness outside the icy cave. The storm's fury showed no sign of waning. Kalen kept watch, his eyes scanning the shadows, alert for any sign of danger. The pups slept at last, their tiny breaths rising in gentle puffs against the chill. The Luna remained awake, sitting beside them, her hands brushing the soft fur, murmuring low words that Kalen could not hear but felt in the quiet hum of the room. "Do you always protect those who are not your own?" she asked suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. Kalen's gaze met hers, sharp and unwavering. "Not always, but sometimes duty is not enough." Sometimes you act because it is right, not because it benefits you. His words carried weight, an echo of the battles he had fought and the lives he had chosen to spare or destroy. The Luna studied him, her dark eyes searching for hidden motives. She wanted to see weakness, a flaw she could exploit. Instead, she found something steadier, something that mirrored her own stubborn resolve. She allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection, a dangerous, fragile thought. Perhaps this enemy was not entirely like the others. Perhaps beneath the cold, commanding exterior, there was something capable of compassion. The hours passed, marked only by the crackle of the fire and the occasional gust of wind that rattled the cave's entrance. Kalen finally spoke again, his voice low. "You must tell me, why are they in danger? Why would your clan risk everything to harm them?" The Luna's gaze dropped to the pups. "Because of prophecy," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The elders, they believe these pups will change the fate of our clans. They fear them. They fear what they represent. I cannot allow them to be used as weapons." Kalen frowned, his mind turning over the implications. Prophecy, magic, destiny, these were not new to him. He had fought many who claimed to know the future, many who believed themselves bound to fate. Yet looking at the tiny lives before him, he understood the gravity of her words. They were not merely surviving the storm. They carried the weight of hope and fear for generations. A long silence followed. Outside, the storm's howl seemed to pause for a moment, as if listening. Kalen could feel the tension coiling in the cave, in the air, in the space between him and the Luna. It was a delicate balance, trust forming, yet fragile, easily broken. "You will stay here tonight," Kalen said finally, rising to stand near the entrance. "I will not allow anyone to approach without warning. Sleep if you can." The Luna nodded, wrapping her cloak tighter around herself and the pups. She tried to rest, but her mind raced, haunted by the dangers that waited beyond the cave. She glanced at Kalen, who stood like a sentinel, his eyes sharp, his body tense. He seemed eternal, unyielding, yet she sensed a quiet storm within him too, a storm he did not reveal, a battle between duty, instinct, and something deeper, something she could not name. Hours later, a faint sound reached them, a crack in the ice, a subtle shift in the wind. Kalen's head snapped toward the entrance, eyes narrowing. Shapes moved beyond the cave, shadows against the white storm. His hand moved instinctively to the hilt of his sword. The Luna stirred beside the pups, her body rigid. She sensed the danger before it fully revealed itself. "They've found us," she whispered, fear and resolve mingling in her voice. Kalen's eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. "Then we will face them together," he said, his words carrying the weight of command and promise both. The shapes approached, moving through the snow with purpose, unaware of the fire-lit cave that lay beyond the storm. Kalen adjusted his stance, placing himself between the Luna and the pups, a living shield. He felt her body tense against his side, her warmth a fragile comfort against the biting cold. "You trust me?" he asked, not unkindly. She met his gaze, her dark eyes steady. "For the pups," she said simply. "I will trust you for their sake." It was not a declaration of loyalty, not yet, but it was enough. It was enough for now. The figures outside grew closer, and the wind carried faint words, shouted commands from unseen mouths. The Shadowclaw warriors, their intentions clear, driven by fear and obedience, were closing in. Kalen's heart did not falter. He had faced countless foes before, but this was different. This was not just a battle of strength, but of hearts, trust, and fragile alliances yet unspoken. He drew a deep breath, feeling the storm around them, the fire's warmth behind him, and the fragile life of the pups at his feet. The night was far from over. The cave had grown quiet again, though the wind still screamed outside. The Shadowclaw warriors had been driven back, Kalen's strength, strategy, and presence making it clear that no one could approach without his permission. Yet the night had left its mark. The pups slept fitfully, stirred by distant howls that carried even through the ice-thick walls. The Luna sat beside them, fingers brushing softly over their fur, eyes shadowed with worry and fatigue. Kalen remained near the entrance, vigilant, his sword still within easy reach. Though the immediate threat had been quelled, he knew the danger was far from over. The Shadowclaws would not abandon the hunt. They would regroup, and sooner or later they would strike again. Yet something else weighed on him more heavily than the thought of battle, her presence. The Luna, enemy of his clan, yet protector of life, had awakened something in him he had long thought buried. A storm he could not name raged within his chest, unpredictable and undeniable. "You should rest," he said quietly, keeping his voice low so as not to disturb the pups. She shook her head, her dark hair falling over her face. "I cannot. I need to think, plan. They will not stop. They will come again." Her words were urgent, but beneath the urgency, there was a vulnerability she could not hide. Kalen observed her carefully, noting how her jaw clenched, how her eyes darted toward the cave entrance at every shift of the wind. "You have done enough," Kalen said, stepping closer. "Your strength alone brought you here. The rest is mine to bear." She looked up, her eyes meeting his, a mixture of disbelief and defiance in her gaze. "You protect me too," she whispered, almost to herself. "Even knowing who I am," Kalen's expression did not waver. "Yes," he said simply, "because right now your survival and theirs is my responsibility. I do not allow harm to life while I can stop it. That is the law of the Alpha and the law of what is right." Her lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. She had no argument strong enough, not when the weight of his gaze carried certainty she could not ignore. For a long time they remained silent, listening to the wind, the distant cries of wolves, the subtle movement of snow outside. And then, almost imperceptibly, a sound reached them, a faint scrape against ice, deliberate and soft, almost as though the storm itself carried a message. Kalen stiffened. "They are coming again," he muttered. His voice was low but sharp, a blade in the quiet. He moved to the cave's entrance, eyes narrowing against the whiteness. The Luna rose beside him, body tense, instincts flaring. "I can help," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I know their ways. I can predict their movements." Kalen regarded her for a long moment. She was proud, independent, and fierce, a natural leader. Yet here now her knowledge could save lives. He could not ignore it. "Very well," he said finally. "But heed my command. One wrong move and they will fall to me first." "Do you understand?" She nodded. "I understand." Together they moved to a small outcrop near the cave's mouth, peering into the storm. Shapes began to emerge, dark figures moving with purpose, guided by the loyalty of the Shadowclaws and the promise of vengeance. Kalen and the Luna exchanged a glance, silent agreement passing between them. This was no longer simply survival. It was a battle of wits, courage, and instinct. The first Shadowclaw stepped onto the ice, unaware of the presence waiting above. Kalen shifted, his muscles coiling, ready to strike. The Luna whispered softly beside him, pointing out subtle shifts in their movements. "The one with the black cloak, he carries fire stones," she said. "He will try to light the brush outside the cave. If he succeeds, the fire will block our exit." Kalen nodded. "Then we strike first." The battle was swift and precise. Kalen moved like a shadow, strong and decisive, his sword striking with measured force. The Luna used her knowledge of the terrain, guiding him, predicting movements, ensuring every strike protected not only him but the pups behind them. Despite the enmity between their clans, despite the centuries of distrust, they moved as one, an unspoken alliance formed by necessity, sharpened by instinct. The Shadowclaws were driven back, but not without leaving their mark. A fragment of ice struck Kalen's arm, drawing blood, and one of the pups stirred violently, whimpering. The Luna rushed to soothe them, pressing her small body against theirs, murmuring protective words that Kalen could not understand but felt. "You are fearless," Kalen said quietly, watching her. His voice held something more than admiration, an acknowledgement of courage, of strength, of the bond forming between them. She looked at him, eyes wide, emotions flickering in the firelight. I must be. There is no choice. Her gaze dropped to the pups again. And yet I never expected help from you. Kaelin's jaw tightened. Do not mistake duty for favor. She smiled faintly, the gesture fleeting but real. Perhaps I do not. The night pressed on, heavy with snow and danger. They returned to the cave, tending the pups, checking their supplies and strengthening their makeshift shelter. And then, beneath the fire's glow, the Luna began to speak. There is something you must know, she said cautiously, glancing at him. A secret about the Shadow Claws. About why they hunt these pups. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. Speak. Her voice was low, urgent. The elders, they believe the pups are tied to a curse, a prophecy that claims they could decide the fate of our clans. They fear them. They believe these lives could either destroy us or redeem us. That is why they come. That is why they would see them harmed. Kaelin's expression hardened. Prophecy and curses were not unfamiliar to him, but the weight of it pressed differently here. These were not abstract threats. They were living, breathing children, innocent and vulnerable, and they depended on both him and the Luna for survival. He exhaled slowly. Then we must protect them, no matter the cost. She nodded, a flicker of gratitude softening her face. I trust you, she admitted quietly, but I do not trust the world outside. Kaelin placed a hand on her shoulder briefly, a silent affirmation, not of affection but of alliance. The storm outside seemed to pause for a moment, as if acknowledging the fragile pact within the cave. Hours later, exhaustion overcame them both. The fire dwindled, leaving only embers that cast ghostly shadows across the icy walls. Kaelin took the first watch, his eyes sharp, every sense alert. The Luna slept beside the pups, her body curled protectively, her face softened by vulnerability. He felt a strange pull, a tension in his chest he did not fully understand, a mixture of admiration, concern, and a dangerous curiosity. In the depths of the night, a sound shattered the fragile quiet, a soft, deliberate knock against the ice. Kaelin's eyes snapped toward the entrance. His sword was in hand in an instant. The Luna stirred, eyes opening wide with fear and readiness. They've returned, she whispered. Kaelin's gaze was steady, cold as steel. This time we uncover the truth, he said. We find out who sent them and why. The figures approached, shadow claws, but different from before. These moved with precision, bearing a mark Kaelin recognized. The sigil of a rogue faction within their enemy clan, one that acted without the elders' consent, yet carried their own deadly ambition. The Luna's body tensed. They are not acting on orders. They want something else, she said, dread creeping into her voice. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. Then we must face it together. A tense silence followed, broken only by the wind's howl and the soft, protective whimpers of the pups. Kaelin and the Luna exchanged a glance, a bond forged in survival, strengthened by shared danger, yet fragile, untested in the world beyond their cave. The first Shadowclaw stepped into the firelight, his eyes widening in surprise at the sight before him. Kaelin's sword moved in a blur, precise and deadly. The Luna guided him silently, her knowledge of their tactics allowing him to anticipate every move. And as the last of the intruders fled into the storm, defeated and wary, the Luna turned to Kaelin, her voice trembling with relief and fear. This is only the beginning. They will not stop. They will try again, and next time it may not be so simple. Kaelin's jaw tightened. He looked at her, at the pups, at the cave that had become a fortress of fragile trust. Then we will be ready. No matter what comes, we survive, together. Her eyes met his again, dark and searching. There was something unspoken there, a promise, a question, a fragile seed of trust, and perhaps something deeper, something neither of them dared name yet. The storm had grown fiercer by dawn. Snow swept across the mountains in furious sheets, blurring the world into a swirl of white. Wolves howled from distant ridges, their cries carrying through the wind like echoes of ancient spirits. Kalen stood at the cave's entrance, the wind tugging at his cloak, sword in hand, eyes sharp as ice. Behind him, the Luna moved with cautious grace, shielding the pups within the folds of her cloak, her face pale but determined. "The rogue faction is closing in," she said, her voice firm despite the cold. "They have numbers, but they lack our knowledge of the terrain." Kalen nodded. "Then we use that. The mountains are ours tonight." He scanned the horizon. Shapes were emerging through the storm, figures dark against the blinding white, moving with purpose. Kalen could feel the weight of destiny pressing on them, heavy as the snow-laden sky above. Together, they stepped out into the blizzard. Kalen led, his sword a constant presence, while the Luna guided the pups, her instincts sharp and precise. Despite the chaos, despite the cold biting through their cloaks and skin, the Alpha King and the Luna moved with quiet synchronicity, their trust unspoken but absolute. The first wave of shadow claws appeared at the ridge, unaware of the hidden paths Kalen and the Luna had discovered. Kalen's voice cut through the wind. "Hold them here. Do not let them advance toward the pups." The rogue warriors hesitated, uncertain in the whiteout. Kalen's presence was commanding, his aura of authority undeniable even to his enemies. The Luna stepped forward beside him, her gaze hard, fierce, unyielding. She knew their weaknesses, their predictable patterns, and she whispered directions to Kalen with careful urgency. Together they were unstoppable. The battle was swift and precise. Kalen moved like shadow and steel, every strike calculated to neutralize without unnecessary harm. The Luna acted beside him, leading, guiding, predicting. Their movements were in harmony, born not of alliance by choice but of necessity, and yet a subtle bond had formed, stronger than either had anticipated. One rogue tried to reach the pups, leaping over ice with a weapon raised. The Luna was there first, intercepting with a quick strike that sent him tumbling into a drift. Kalen's hand met her shoulder as they passed, a silent acknowledgement, not of affection, but of unity. The last of the Shadow Claws faltered, realization dawning that they faced not just strength, but coordination and intelligence born of trust. With a final push, Kalen drove them back into the storm, leaving them scattered and defeated across the icy slopes. As the wind calmed slightly, Kalen lowered his sword. His breathing was steady, but the adrenaline lingered, a lingering echo of danger narrowly survived. He turned to the Luna, whose cheeks were flushed with exertion, eyes dark and bright with intensity. "They underestimated us," he said, voice low, "and they will not try again tonight." The Luna nodded, gathering the pups close. "But tomorrow someone else may come, someone smarter, stronger. We cannot stay here forever." Kalen's jaw tightened. "Then we prepare. We train, we hide, we protect. Nothing else matters." His words were final, but there was an edge of something else beneath them. Concern, curiosity, something deeper he could not name. For hours they reinforced the cave, checking their supplies, marking paths through the snow, tending to the pups. The fire crackled low, flickering shadows across the ice walls, casting a quiet warmth over their efforts. The Luna worked alongside Kalen, silent but efficient, moving with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to survival under impossible odds. At last, they rested. The pups slept soundly in the corner, nestled beneath the Luna's protective cloak. Kalen sat near the entrance, watching the storm outside, his thoughts turning inward. He had faced countless foes in his life, commanded armies, and survived betrayals. Yet never had he felt the weight of life pressing on him in such a delicate form, not only the lives of the pups, but the fragile trust forming with their Luna. "You think too much," the Luna said suddenly, her voice soft, almost teasing as she approached the fire. He looked up at her, surprised. "I think what I must," Kalen replied. His tone was firm, but there was a faint vulnerability in it, an acknowledgement that he did not fully understand his own heart. She knelt beside the fire, hands brushing the blanket over the pups. I've survived by thinking, by trusting no one, and yet here I am, trusting you." Her words were almost a whisper, fragile and yet daring. Kalen's eyes met hers, sharp and steady. "Trust is earned," he said, "and you have earned it more than you know." The Luna looked away, a faint blush touching her cheeks despite the cold. For a moment the storm outside seemed to pause, the silence heavy with unspoken emotion. But peace was not meant to last. A faint, distant sound reached them, a low rumble carried on the wind. Kalen stiffened immediately, recognizing it not as the storm but as approaching footsteps. He rose, sword in hand, signaling the Luna to follow. "They have returned," she whispered. "The elders themselves, they know where we are." Kalen's expression hardened. "Then we end this tonight." The cave's entrance became a stage for confrontation. Shadows moved through the storm, figures tall and determined, their eyes set with purpose. The rogue faction had returned, but this time they were accompanied by the Elder Shadowclaws, leaders who carried authority and power beyond measure. Kalen stepped forward, his presence commanding, sword gleaming against the snow. "This ends now," he said, voice carrying across the wind. "Leave the pups, leave this place, and you will not be harmed." The Elder's leader stepped forward, eyes cold and calculating. "You protect what is not yours, Alpha of Winterfang. You interfere in matters that do not concern you. These pups are the property of the prophecy. They must serve the fate we decree." Kalen's jaw tightened. "They are lives, not instruments of destiny. I do not care for prophecy. I care for life." The Luna stepped forward beside him, small but fierce, her presence lending strength to Kalen's words. "They are mine to protect," she said, voice unwavering. "And with him I will not fail." A tense silence fell, broken only by the whistling wind and the faint cries of the pups. The elders' faces hardened, but there was something in Kalen's stance, something in the bond between him and the Luna that gave pause. For the first time they saw not just power, but unity forged in trust and survival. Then, in a sudden, decisive movement, Kalen stepped toward them, sword raised. The fight was swift, not of reckless force but of precision and strategy. He and the Luna moved together, protecting the pups, countering attacks, and using the terrain of ice and snow to their advantage. Every motion spoke of silent trust, every glance an unspoken understanding. By dawn, the rogue elders and their followers had been driven back, scattered across the blizzard-swept slopes. The storm had subsided, leaving a fragile quiet in its wake. The pups slept peacefully, undisturbed, as if sensing the battle was over. Kalen sheathed his sword and turned to the Luna. "It is done," he said quietly. "For now." She looked at him, exhaustion and relief mingling in her gaze. "For now," she echoed, the words carrying the weight of all they had endured. The storm had passed, but the silence that followed was heavy, charged with emotions neither of them could name. Kalen approached her, eyes searching, and saw the strength, the fear, and the courage that had guided her through the blizzard. "You have changed things," he said softly. "Not just tonight, but everything that comes after. You have shown me that even the fiercest heart can protect, and even the strongest king can learn to trust." The Luna looked at him, her gaze steady. "And you have shown me that even an enemy can become an ally. Even a king can be more than a title. You have given me hope." They stood together in the quiet morning, the snow settling around them in gentle flakes, a fragile peace enveloping the mountains. The pups stirred, pressing against the Luna's warmth, their small lives a symbol of survival, hope, and the possibility of a future unbound by hatred. Kalen reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, a simple gesture, a quiet acknowledgement of everything they had endured together. The Luna met his gaze, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. For the first time, they were no longer merely Alpha and Luna, enemies bound by fate and feud. They were allies, guardians, partners in the survival of life itself. And as the sun began to rise, casting pale gold across the mountains, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. The wind whispered through the peaks, carrying a promise that even in a world forged by ice, blood, and prophecy, hearts could change, trust could grow, and redemption could be found.